Okay, this is the last lecture that we're going to do for our bankruptcy portion of this class. Remember, this is Social Security, Workers' Comp, and bankruptcy. I focus on bankruptcy the most because I think that is where most of the jobs are for you. What we're going to do now is we're going to shift from Chapter 7, which is, again, total liquidation bankruptcy, where you come out with everything being discharged, that's dischargeable, everything being discharged. Now we're going to shift to Chapter 13. So this is a bankruptcy that is available to individuals who have regular income. What is regular income? We're going to get into that, but this is for individuals. Remember, Chapter 7 was for individuals and for businesses. We really just did a consumer debt because that gives you exposure to all of the different steps that are involved in a Chapter 7. If we were to do a business in Chapter 7, honestly, I wouldn't be able to get to everything. There's so many different contingencies. For Chapter 13, we're just going to do an overview. Remember, you still have to file schedules just like in a Chapter 7 when you file a Chapter 13. What you're telling the court is, hey, I own too much stuff. If I file a Chapter 7, I'm going to have to sell my house because I have too much equity in my house. Sell my car because I've got too much equity in my car, or too many cars. Maybe I bought a boat outright. But I own too much. I've got money in the bank. Even though I have stuff, I owe way more than I own. And in order for me to move forward, the better path is for me to ask the court through a Chapter 13 petition to put the brakes on. Let me take a breather. Let me reorganize how I pay these things. Maybe everything is due on the first of the month, and so you're paying everything late. And then by the time you get to the 16th, you don't have any money left because you're paying all these late fees. Maybe your mortgage is now underwater. You owe more than your house is worth. That happened in the 90s and in the early 2000s, right? 2008, we had the housing bubble burst, and people's equity in their homes plummeted because they had been borrowing way much more than what their house was worth. Okay, so if that's the case, maybe I can reorganize some of those debt payments. Maybe I had a bad accident and I've got lots of medical bills that came from that accident that I need to reorganize. It's not that I wasn't able to pay my bills, but I was off work because I was really hurt, and now I'm behind on my bills and I've got all these medical bills. So these are typical scenarios, different from what we did in the Chapter 7. Remember, in Chapter 7, there's just no way you're going to be able to dig out. You go to the pre-petition credit counseling, and they're going to have to certify, yeah, there's really no way out of this. You got to file for bankruptcy. That's a little different than a Chapter 7. So let's go through just the high points. Chapter 13 is a reorganization for individuals, and those individuals have to have regular income. You can't come and reorganize your debt and not have a way to repay it. So you have to have some kind of regular income, and we'll get into what that is in a minute. The legal source of income, it must be sufficiently regular and stable to enable the debtor to fund his plan in order for it to qualify. Chapter 13 is commenced by filing of a petition, and the debtor is required to provide the same schedules that we did for Chapter 7. The debtor must also file a Chapter 13 plan of reorganization. Along with your petition for bankruptcy, you have to tell the court, hey, this is how I think I can make this thing work. If you don't file it with your petition, you have to file it within 14 days of filing your petition for bankruptcy. There will be a trustee that is appointed by the court to handle your Chapter 13 petition. One difference is that this is kind of a big difference. Okay, sorry about that. One thing that's different between a Chapter 13 and a Chapter 7 case is if you're a co-debtor, so if I co-sign on one of my children's cars, for instance, the automatic stay that would go into effect for the debtor that's filing also applies to me. And the reason why that is we are anticipating that the debtor is going to reorganize that debt and pay that debt forward. So there's no reason for the creditor to go after the co-debtor, and we're not going to punish the co-debtor. Now remember, that's different from Chapter 7. Sorry about that. Everybody wants to talk to me today. Except I can't talk to you. This is the most frustrating part of doing these lectures, is I'm talking to a screen. So for Chapter 7, co-debtors, the bank is going after them. They don't care because they know that that debt is going to be liquidated. Part of the reason why that particular creditor wanted a co-debtor was just for that reason, so that if the original debtor decided to default and then file for bankruptcy, they had somebody else on the hook. With the Chapter 13, we still have the original debtor on the hook. We don't really need to look to the co-debtor yet. And so that's why the co-debtor gets the benefit of the automatic stay, just like the debtor that's filing. Okay? So let's get into all of this. The purpose of Chapter 13 is to take people who may have done things right, paid their bills on time, and they had some kind of an event. Someone got sick, or their car accident, or got fired and had to get a new job and got behind on their bills, but they have a job now. And because you're behind, lots of times it's just impossible to catch up. And so maybe the car is going to get repossessed, or maybe you're behind on your mortgage and they're filing a foreclosure action. And what you want to do is take a breath. I like to think of Chapter 13 and Chapter 11 for businesses, because it's the same idea for businesses, is please let me just take a breath. Please can we talk about this? I will pay you back. I just need to reorganize how we're doing this. Okay? So the big thing about a Chapter 13 is you can't file it if you don't have income. So regular income can be any kind of income. It could be your pension. It could be retirement income. It could be Social Security income. It could be Social Security disability income. All of that qualifies for Chapter 13 debtors. If you don't have an income, if you've been fired, if you're on unemployment, which is temporary, you can't do it. Okay? Okay, so if you don't have regular income, you won't qualify. And if your income is, again, spotty, or you work odd jobs, or you're getting unemployment, or you just don't work, government benefits are all that you have, not going to happen. Not going to happen. You're going to be shipped over to a Chapter 7. Okay? So, how do we do this? Well, we file a Chapter 13 petition. It's The same exact thing as we did with Chapter 7. So we have our petition, we have our supporting schedules that lay out our real estate, our personal property, our co-debtors, did I say personal property? Yeah. Our monthly expenses, our monthly income, our financial affairs. Everything that's in a Chapter 7 is in a Chapter 13. The problem is that not the problem, but the difference is that you should file a plan of reorganization along with that. And we're going to get into what that is in just a minute. Okay? There is a standing trustee who will handle your Chapter 13 case. There will be an order for relief, a notice to creditors, an automatic stay that goes into effect just like in Chapter 7. And just like in Chapter 7, everything that is non-exempt, remember all those exemptions that we have under either federal or state law, everything non-exempt goes into the bankruptcy debtor's estate. Okay, and why do we do that? Well, because we're trying to see what you own and what you owe and what your income is, and how are you going to reorganize everything? How are you going to pay everybody? That means some of your stuff might get sold so that you can lessen the dollar amount that you have to pay over the next 5 to 7 years as part of your plan of reorganization. There is a 341 meeting of the creditors where the court figures out what you really owe, and if any creditors have any problems with anything that you owe. Okay? Now, as far as the plan that gets attached to your petition or filed within 14 days, your plan can run anywhere from 36 to 60 months, from 3 to 5 years. Okay? Wow, that's a long time. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. And the way that you calculate your monthly income and the way that you figure out how you are going to pay all of these creditors is included in your plan of organization. There is a statement of your current monthly income and a calculation of your commitment period. It is illustration 14-A. In your book, it is Form 122C1 of the bankruptcy forms. And, I could take you through the calculations, but I'm going to be honest with you. Everyone has the software. You put the numbers in and it comes out. It'll actually formulate the plan for you. And what you do is you calculate your disposable income. So what does it cost to live? What's your rent, or what's your mortgage? What's your car payment? How much do you spend on food? How much do you spend if you have children? What are your medical expenses? So we're not trying to be unrealistic about this. What we're trying to do is figure out how realistically the creditors can get paid. Remember, we're trying to protect the creditors. Realistically, how are the creditors going to get paid, and how is this going to be a success for you? Because you're going through all this rigmarole. It really doesn't make sense not to try to make this successful. You try and make it as short a period of time as possible, because if you miss a payment, you're kicked out. Okay? You've got to comply with this payment plan, which means you've got to be disciplined. If you're not all that disciplined, 36 months is really the way you want to be. It's 3 years. That's still a long time, right? How do you get there? Sometimes what the court will do is say, okay, you have 3 cars. We're going to sell one of them. And then we're going to take some of that income and we're going to pay these creditors, and that's going to lessen the amount of money and time that you're going to have to spend executing this reorganization plan. Okay? So if there are things that the trustee can sell, can liquidate, they will. They will. In order to make the plan work. They're not just liquidating it because they want to liquidate it like in a Chapter 7. there's really a reason why you're filing Chapter 13, because you want to keep your stuff. But in order to make the plan work, sometimes to create more disposable income so that you can pay more over a shorter period of time, you might have to get rid of a couple of things. Okay? Maybe you only need one car. You don't need two cars. And so as a debtor, you say, we'll live with one car, and if we really need to, we'll Uber. And that way, the money from that car can be pay off some of these creditors. That lessens the load that I have to carry over the next 3 to 5 years. Okay? So once you calculate what your disposable income is, then you can sort of realistically look at, okay, well, what can I pay? If I've got this much disposable income, how am I going to be able to pay this amount of debt with this amount of disposable income, and how long is it going to take me? And again, what we do is we plug the numbers into a form and then we calculate it out. But it's really that simple. How do we figure out our disposable income as compared to how much we owe, and then how am I going to pay that off? How long is it going to take me to pay it off? Now, during your plan, let's say that your plan of reorganization is approved. Doesn't always go that smoothly. Sometimes creditors are like, forget it. And why would they do that? Well, if you're an unsecured creditor in a plan of reorganization, you're probably only going to get a percentage of what you're owed. And if you're a secured creditor, you're probably not going to get all the interest or all of the money that you would have expected if it would have been paid out over the course of the original loan. Everybody's taking a little bit of a hit here. And sometimes creditors say, we don't like this. Here's our plan of reorganization as creditors. We want this plan, not the debtor's plan. Okay? In consumer reorganization plans, it generally doesn't happen that way because generally we're not talking big numbers. But if we're talking about a Chapter 11 reorganization of a business, sometimes because we've got big numbers with inventory and supplies and equipment, the creditors will run the show when it comes to putting together the plan of reorganization. Okay, but when we're talking about just a consumer, an individual, or joint, it can be a husband and wife. Generally, the plan of reorganization might get tweaked a little bit by the trustee, but it's usually approved. Why? I'm going to tell you, it's the magic of software. The same software that the lawyer uses, plugging in the numbers for the client, for the debtor, it's the same software the court uses. So everybody's on the same page, right? We're not putting new numbers in. We're not trying to fudge anything. The numbers are the numbers. There's very little wiggle room. And so if it looks like this thing can be paid out over 3 years, bam, that is great. If it's going to take you 5 years, you're taking a risk. Once the plan is approved, the debtor makes payments to the trustee, and then the trustee disperses the money according to the plan. So if every month the car payment gets, the car company that you financed your car through gets so much money, and your mortgage company gets so much money, and the doctor's bills get so much money, and the credit cards get so much money, the trustee is the one who takes your check every month and divvies it up and sends it out. By the way, trustee gets paid every month too out of that payment. Okay? They don't work for free. And so that's how that works. Okay? Once you get to the end of your plan, you are discharged in bankruptcy. Not until then. You are still a debtor in bankruptcy for 3 to 5 years. It's kind of the same deal with your credit as you had with the Chapter 7. It's going to be really hard for you to get credit. You probably shouldn't get more credit because this really is a tight plan. They figure out your disposable income, and you're giving a good chunk of your disposable income to the bankruptcy trustee every month. No fooling around. If you miss a payment, the bankruptcy trustee can dismiss your case. And you're done. Usually they don't. Usually they try and work with you. Usually if you call them and say, hey, look, it's our car broke down and I can only give you this much this month. Sometimes there's a little bit of wiggle room. Depends on who your trustee is. So if you default, you're dismissed and you're right back where you started. Or if you default, you could be kicked to Chapter 7 and everything gets sold. So the shorter the period of time that you have to make these monthly payments to the trustee, the better. So, you don't want to try and go out and buy a new house while you're in Chapter 13 reorganization. There are limitations. You have to live within those limitations. And the longer that you commit yourself to this plan, the more difficult it is. It's a little tough. So that's your overview of Chapter 13. I know it's really skimming the surface, but in order for me to get to at least looking at workers' comp and looking at Social Security disability for you, I have to end it there. Okay? So, because if I go any deeper, then it gets more confusing, and I'm not going to do that to you. So there is an assignment, there is a discussion, and there's vocabulary that goes with this portion of this module. It's hard for me to remember to call these modules. That goes with this module. Make sure you do them. For your next module, it's basically a final exam over bankruptcy. Now I know it's open book. You've got open books. It's not hard for you to do this. But get it in, please, on time, because I gotta grade all this stuff. It's not going to be a great thing for me to try and grade 15 weeks of 3 classes in an evening. So please try and get that in as quickly as you can. Any questions, please give me a call, text me, email me. Happy to help you. If you're having trouble getting assignments into me, email them to me. Email them. I got to get them. Okay? Thanks so much.